Chapter 8, Section 1, Energy and Life. Chemical energy. Energy is the ability to do work. Nearly everything you do takes energy. Lights, radios, and computers all use electrical energy to run. When you toast marshmallows on a campfire, you are using heat energy to warm the food. A car runs on fuel, the chemical energy in gasoline. All these things need energy to work. Living things need energy too. It takes plenty of energy to play soccer or other sports. Sometimes it is not as easy to tell that something uses energy. Did you know that even when you are sleeping, your cells are busy using energy? They are using energy to build new molecules and get rid of wastes. Without the ability to get and use energy, cells would die. Energy changes form. Light, heat, and electricity are just three forms of energy. Chemical energy is another form of energy. Chemical energy is the energy stored in chemical bonds. Energy can change from one form to another. When you light a candle, the wax burns. Chemical bonds between carbon and hydrogen atoms in the wax are broken. New bonds form between these atoms and oxygen from the air. What you get are new molecules of carbon dioxide and water. The bonds in the new molecules store less energy than before. The extra chemical energy that came from the old bonds changes form. The extra energy becomes the heat and light given off by the candle's flame. ATP. Living things use chemical energy. One of the most important chemicals that cells use to store and give off energy is called adenosine triphosphate. It's known as ATP for short. ATP is made up of adenine, a sugar called ribose, and three phosphate groups. The phosphate groups are the key to why ATP can store and release energy. Storing energy. Adenosine diphosphate, ADP, is similar to ATP. However, ADP has only two phosphate groups instead of three. This difference is the key to how living things store energy. When a cell has extra energy, it can store small amounts of it by adding a phosphate group to ADP molecules, which turns ADP to ATP, releasing energy. Cells can give off the energy stored in ATP by breaking the chemical bonds between the second and third phosphate groups. A cell can add or subtract these phosphate groups whenever it needs to store or use energy. Using chemical energy. Cells use ATP in many ways. For example, cells use it to power active transport. ATP provides the energy needed to move material into and out of many cells. ATP also helps proteins and muscles to slide closer together. This motion makes muscles flex. Cells that crawl, twist, and swim depend on ATP as well. Energy from ATP powers many other important events, such as the making of proteins and responses to chemical signals outside of the cell. Short-term storage. ATP is so useful that you might think cells would be packed with it. In fact, most cells only have a small amount, enough to last for a few seconds of activity. The reason is that ATP is great for giving off a small amount of energy very quickly, but it is not good for storing large amounts for a long time. The sugar glucose is much better for energy storage. A single glucose molecule stores more than 90 times the energy of a molecule of ATP, so it makes sense for cells to store energy in the form of glucose. Cells can then use the stored glucose to make ATP and ADP as needed. ATP comes from food. Once cells use up their supply of ATP, they must somehow make more of it. So where do living things get the energy they use to make ATP? The simple answer is that it comes from the chemical compounds that we call food. But different living things get their food from different sources. Heterotrophs eat food. Living things that get food by eating other living things are known as heterotrophs. Some heterotrophs get their food by eating plants, such as grasses. Others, such as the cheetah shown at the right, get food by eating other animals. Still, other heterotrophs, mushrooms for example, get food by breaking down the tissues of dead things. Autotrophs make food. The energy in nearly all food molecules first came from the sun. Plants, algae, and some bacteria can use light energy from the sun to make their own food. Living things that make their own food are called autotrophs. All life on Earth depends on autotrophs to get energy from sunlight and store it in the molecules that make up food. The process by which autotrophs use the energy of sunlight to produce high-energy carbohydrates, sugars, and starches that can be used as food is known as photosynthesis. This is the end of chapter 8.1.